Welcome again, Larry. And a brief introduction to the whole session and our esteemed guest today. So, eBaithak, welcome everybody. eBaithak is a flagship program conducted by Center for Civil Society. We are a think tank based in Delhi, and we're known for conducting talk sessions wherein we invite guests all over and we talk about public policy, current affairs, social philosophies, anything that falls under that umbrella. And this time we have a guest, the one and only Larry Sanger, one of the co-founders of Wikipedia. Larry currently heads the Knowledge Standards Foundation. It is a nonprofit focused on information dissemination and removing the bias that we see online. And we're just so happy to have you here, Larry.
It's good to be here with you, Che.
Whenever you're ready, we can dive right into the questions that we have for you.
Absolutely. Shoot, just fire away.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I have to begin with it for the sake of our audience. What is the driving force that led you to start Wikipedia? How was the formation? What was your part in it? Let's take us through the origin story that you have usually.
Yeah, to start Wikipedia or to start the Knowledge Standards Foundation?
Wikipedia, but of course anything that you tell us, would be happy to listen to you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, well, it's there's a lot of different things. I mean, the um, efficient cause of my of the thing coming into existence is me being hired by Jimmy Wales to start
Mhm.
Newpedia, which then led to Wikipedia. I myself
Just for
was,
clarification, sorry, for
Mhm.
everybody, people may not be aware of Jimmy Wales. Jimmy Wales is the co-founder along with our guest Larry Sanger here, and that's who he's talking about. Go on, Larry. Sorry.
That's right. Um, so just as a little background, there was a for-profit company called Bombas.com, Bombas Inc. Actually, they had a lot of different side projects in which they were trying to make money one way or another. And
Mhm.
actually, Newpedia, Nupedia, was going to be one of them. And we ended up starting Wikipedia as a content feeder for Newpedia. Um, my job within the small company was to basically to start and manage both of them. Um, so, uh, and Jimmy was like one of three partners. One was silent in a different city. The other was a friend of mine. Um, and there were other people who worked for other little projects. So in the company. So let's see. I mean, personally, the reason why I was interested in the job in the first place, I was just about to finish a PhD, and I was thinking, I had thought actually for some years before that, that if there was one kind of job that I would like to have, um, other than a professor of philosophy, because I had been studying, like all three of my degrees are in philosophy. Um, if there's one other kind of job that I might like to have, it would be uh, an editor of an encyclopedia. But the idea of starting an encyclopedia from scratch, well, that's very cool. I really liked that idea. So,
Oh, you were telling us about Newpedia. What is that, and why did Wikipedia evolve out of it? Is that what you're trying to say?
yep,
How is it
exactly.
right?
So basically, Jimmy Wales had the idea of a public contributed free encyclopedia. So basically, an encyclopedia that think of it as a collaborative project that does for encyclopedias what Linux does for operating systems or Firefox for browsers. In other words, it's an open source encyclopedia, but we called it open content because the thing that becomes free to distribute after that is not the source code. That doesn't really matter so much. It's the actual content. Um, initially, then the idea was to have a traditional, fairly traditional, straight-laced sort of encyclopedia that was led by experts. So the different sections of the encyclopedia assigned articles. There was a seven-step editorial process, and it was very arduous. It's very difficult to um,
That's a major
make money
difference
anyway. Yeah.
between Nupedia and Wikipedia, you would say, because anybody can contribute to Wikipedia, but Nupedia was more like top down. People had to be qualified to have some type of technical expertise in order to be able to edit. It's like Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yes, to a certain extent anyway. Not to write an article. Generally, I think what we asked was that you have a bachelor's degree and like a proven ability to write. But to be one of the editors or peer reviewers, then you had to have like the terminal degree in the field and that sort of thing, actual, you know, qualifications. So,
Got it. All right, I have a question that I'm sure everybody wants to know. Wikipedia wants to know the answer for it. Wikipedia is a source of information in modern internet landscape. It's found to be credible. It's found to be almost all-encompassing. There is, if you want to know about something, almost certainly Wikipedia covers it. Something that I call is called the Wikipedia contrast, wherein we trust Wikipedia more than a random hand. Wikipedia gets a lot of criticism for being not being able to provide a reliable method of distributing information. In pop culture, when you tell people that, oh, this claim, I know it from Wikipedia, people are quick to criticize you for saying, don't, is this the best source of information that you've got? Wikipedia, really, Wikipedia, that is the
mhm.
tone. On the other hand, it is credible on certain aspects. What are your thoughts on it? Why is there a dichotomy of perception when it comes to Wikipedia?
Well, the sheer size of Wikipedia, the fact that it actually does have some answers at all, and that most of the answers check out. I mean, that's just an objective fact, because most of the information in an encyclopedia is not the sort of information that is subject to bias or even subject to getting badly wrong, if you know what I'm saying. We're simply documenting on Wikipedia the uh, what is known on the subject. The problems with Wikipedia's reputation are centered as I like to say, the culture war, generally speaking. Um, so if it matters to politicians, to social activists of one kind or another, in religion, in uh, when to the corporate bottom lines also. Um, and then basically the information becomes a hotly contested, property, as it were. And because Wikipedia is anonymous, even the leadership of Wikipedia is, by my count, something like 85% anonymous. Like we don't know who these people are. we don't know who they're working for, and so it's difficult to say to what extent Wikipedia is actually guided by people with a particular agenda. They act like they do in many cases. So now, I don't really want to get into this myself, but I have been I've been accosted on X by quite a few Hindus who
Oh,
yes, who basically have been urging me to speak out against Wikipedia's anti-Hindu bias. Now, I know nothing about it. It's not my country. It's as they say, I have no dog in this fight. And I'm not calling anybody a dog, by the way. Uh, I'm just saying that that it's just fascinating to me that there are the same sort of culture war problems going on there that there are maybe more famously in the United States. Um, and those same sorts of conflicts play out on Wikipedia. So, from my point of view, I think Wikipedia is secularist. So the general, you can characterize the sort of point of view that Wikipedia has, at least the Wikipedia in English, and I characterize it as globalist, academic, secular, and progressive, right?
yeah.
So just think about each one. Globalist, so and this obviously not in the virtuous sense of each individual
Being
locality
well-traveled,
being respected.
cultured. Yeah.
We're talking about global organizations imposing their will upon
Hmm.
basically every part of the world, um, as much as they can anyway. Um, again, academic. Here, that sounds good, I suppose, doesn't it? Often it is, but it depends on whether the academy in general represents a particular point of view that is actually contested in the broader society. And I think it is often, and a lot of times it's only one particular um, dominant point of view from the academy that is permitted on Wikipedia. Um, so the point then is that all of these different features of Wikipedia, of the point of view of Wikipedia, mean that certain points of view are systematically excluded. So Christians are they're represented, yes, but they're represented from the point of view of a secularist. So there's certain information on certain topics that's actually very hard to find on Wikipedia. That goes for Christianity. I imagine it probably goes for Hindus. I don't know. Um,
You're, yeah.
Jews told me the same, actually, and that basically it has become deeply, deeply anti-Israeli since the October 7th attacks. So,
You are not wrong about that. We do. I have in in when I was involved in preparation to talking to you, I went out my way to find out certain Hindu pages that might be in the interest of Hindus that have a certain type of anti-Hindu bias. And I think it is a little funny that they accost you thinking that you have control over whether or not you can do anything about it. But if you'd like to know, I'll tell you certain pages that are egregiously anti-India, anti-Hindu.
hmm,
The first one is swastika page. Swastika is a symbol that is not unique to India or Hinduism, but a lot of the East is allied to swastika culturally. And in the page of swastika, it says that uh, that is a symbol that is associated with the Nazi Party and with Hitler, whereas swastika predates the Hakenkreuz, which is what Hitler originally called what we now call swastika. And Hindus have tried to remove that particular mention of the association with Hitler and Germany, but to no avail. We were not able to change the information that is about us on Wikipedia. And so swastika is, I suppose, a page that gets looked at pretty regularly, and it's a constant. You cannot change the fact, you cannot change the claim that it was associated with the Nazi Party. And I can name a few more examples for you. One other method of medicine in India we have is
If
Ayurveda. Yeah,
if I could comment on that a little
sure,
bit.
sure, sure.
I obviously I would think the page titled swastika should have something about the Nazi use of the
Mhm.
swastika, but if what you're saying is that it only has information about the Nazi use, or if it leads with that and leaves the Hindu use to far down in the article, that is what I would call an instance of clear Western bias.
I don't know to what extent it does that. I'm not I'm not very aware of that, but I do know that it mentions swastika and Hitler and Nazi. It makes those connections pretty heavily to a point where it confirms that that is a fact according to it. And various types of medicine like Ayurveda is openly called pseudoscientific, and that its practices are some type of coincidence or failure. This is mentioned on the pages as if modern medicine, Western medicine, has not failed. I mean, we know that at one point, bloodletting and j- not washing hands were part of Western medicine. So, yeah, it is littered with anti-Hindu and anti-Jewish bias. And the GASP acronym of yours in your 90s, which we'll get to later, captures it very accurately.
Right.
Mhm. And go on.
There are many examples, obviously, of types of bias in Wikipedia. So people who haven't encountered the concept before can be pretty surprised, I find. So.
Right. I don't wonder if Wikipedia has gotten into trouble legally for some of the information that could be classified as libelous, I suppose. Um, I'm not sure about how do they get by? How is that they have no problem surviving?
So the question is, well, I suppose I should introduce what the problem is in the first place,
Mhm.
of libel. Yes. Um, so again, because Wikipedia is anonymous, it's entirely possible for people to how shall I put this? Um, to malign others in various ways without any consequences. They don't have any personal consequences because they are anonymous, and they're not going to be simply kicked out of the project, depending on the person that we're talking about. Because if the project as a whole is opposed to what that person stands for, then it's easy for such people to be kicked out. Um, or sorry, it's easy for such articles about such unpopular people to be, um, to contain a lot of libel. Um, so in the United States, uh, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act um, has a section called Section 230, which immunizes people from prosecution. They cannot be prosecuted if you own a platform. So the Wikimedia Foundation owns the Wikipedia platform, right? Um, and it cannot be sued for anything that happens on Wikipedia. You might think maybe it should be able to be, um, and perhaps it should, but in fact, it can't in the United States. All they have to do is follow a few simple rules, like takedown of offending information that falls into a few categories, and that does not include libel. In other words, you're not obligated to remove libel from your platform. Um, well, or rather, I should say, you might be, but first there actually has to be a legal determination that there was libel, and how are you going to get that without a defendant? And if you can't find the defendant, you can't make a defendant out of the Wikimedia Foundation. And if you can't actually name a human being, you can only talk about an account, then you can't really bring a lawsuit against the actual author of the libel. So that's the problem. Over the years, a lot of people have approached me with complaints about how articles about themselves are contain actual actionable libel. They tell me I would like to sue, but I can't. And you know, I just it bothers me quite a bit. I'm sorry uh, that I started something that does um, harm their reputation. I feel personally responsible for that. That's actually one of the reasons why I have continued to criticize Wikipedia and care about Wikipedia over the years. Otherwise, I think I largely would have forgotten about it.
Well, I do hear what you're saying, but I do believe, I know for a fact that you did start it out with good intentions. In fact, I heard your podcast with Peter McCormack, wherein you said that Wikipedia is supposed to be one of those platforms that the establishment is scared of, wherein all types of opinions are presented without intervention from authorities. And that if that is not an honorable goal to have for a platform's inception, I don't know what is. But yeah, as good things sometimes do, it does get captured. And well, I do see that you're working on a line of sight to reform, which is not thesis. I am very excited about what it could do for us. I would like to go through it all per each thesis, but then for that, I would like to ask a few more questions about Wikipedia itself. So,
Sure.
when you tell us that Wikipedia cannot be sued, I wonder, for example, you tell me that everybody, any information that goes on the platform is made by editors who are anonymous. Anonymous to the extent that they have, you would say names per your words. For example, runaway flower, or I'm just making things up. Usernames like these could be responsible for writing about, say, even your page. How happy are you with your page on
Mhm.
Wikipedia, right? And so when that happens, and people like that, when people like Popeye 67 or 8969 are responsible for making content available worldwide, it is a little jarring to know that they can skate by behind Wikipedia's protection, especially when I don't see a lot of difference between how Facebook and Wikipedia, they are both user based, and any shady business on Facebook. Well, yeah, it does protect Facebook, but I do believe that there is somebody that you can hold accountable, whereas on Wikipedia you can't.
Right. Well, I mean, it's interesting. On Facebook, of course, and YouTube and all the big platforms, moderation only has only an ancillary function of um, taking real wrongdoers to task, essentially. Um, to Of course, they all try to a certain extent to like get rid of um, the pornography and the death threats and various other categories of speech that are regarded as problematic. Of course, Wikipedia will do the same thing, and they have to deal with another category of speech that they don't like, namely, um, you know, digital graffiti. Essentially, is what I call it. Just nonsense, and some people will just start like blanking a page or typing whatever. So these are all categories that are sort of not disputed. There needs to be, of course, um, moderators in all of these systems. I do tend to think that platforms like uh, Facebook and Twitter are sometimes more responsive on issues of libel. Um, Not always. Again, it depends. It's possible for people to be very badly libeled on Twitter before anything happens, on X as it's called now. Um, it's possible to see every day, actually. Um, but Wikipedia is different because, X and Facebook and Instagram, those are conversations among people, and people don't take them as reference information. Wikipedia is different because it's an encyclopedia. The information in it is portrayed rightly or wrongly and understood by many people, again, rightly or wrongly, as objectively true. It isn't, but it's sort of understood that way. So it is definitely a problem. And so we can get into solutions if you like, but um, not really sure what else you'd want to say along those lines. That setting up what the problem is, I mean.
Right. Yeah, but I do think that you cover a little bit of it on the line thesis, which I am going to get to. Very excited for that bit. But before
Yeah,
that,
maybe we should
I do want to
maybe we
cover a
should
few.
introduce what the
Sure.
nine
Okay.
are.
Aren't you the better person to do that?
Right. Okay. So on September 29th, I released work that I had been working on for the last, the previous 9 months. And it is essentially a short book, um, divided into nine theses, one thesis, nine theses. Um, and this is based on the 95 Theses of Martin Luther, which launched the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation in 1519, I believe it was, or 1517. Okay. And so a thesis, of course, is simply a position statement, right? And what the theses are there are two different kinds of position statements about Wikipedia. Um, there's a problem and there's a solution, right? Um, so just to take an example, thesis number one, the problem is that Wikipedia has essentially misrepresented itself when it says that it resolves editorial disputes by working toward consensus. And the
Just
solution
so
is,
sorry to intervene right there. Just a little bit of context for the people who aren't very familiar. So when a edits are introduced by individual users, which can be you, I, anybody, and when there is a page that is controversial, so for example, BJP, which is a political party, the ruling one here in India, there are people who like it, who don't, and they want the page painted in a perspective depending on who is editing the page. And so, since we cannot encompass all the perspectives, and nor the page can look too good, laudatory of the political party, or too vandalistic, speaking down upon them. So Wikipedia has a procedure which is called consensus farming, wherein people at the back end talk about what should go on the page and they discuss it. They talk about what sources to use, what information to use, how to write it, what's a good source, what's a bad source, what text to talk about, what to focus on, what goes on the top of the page, what goes on the middle of the page, what goes at the end. So that procedure is called consensus, which is what Larry is going to talk about now. Go on, Larry.
right, right. Um, but as a matter of fact, that's not really what happens. In other words, um, you might think that what's going on when people are trying to decide whether to call the killing of many people in the Gaza Strip by the Israelis a genocide. That's one of the hotly disputed issues now. You might think that if they're working toward a consensus, then what that means is that they take a sort of conciliatory midway position that acknowledges the different views of the people in the dispute. And that seems to me that would be required by an actual consensus. But that's not actually what they mean by a consensus. A consensus in Wikipedia land simply means um, the end position that is arrived at after some discussion and all of the relevant rules and the relevant sources have been fully discussed to the satisfaction of the dominant players in the space. And what that ultimately means is it can be as biased as you like. And in fact, it can completely ignore a whole position, which in that case, in the case of the article titled Gaza Genocide, it entirely ignores the Israeli point of view in the article, at least last I checked. Um, so, in what sense, I ask the Wikipedians, is that actually a consensus? It's a consensus of all those who think alike, which is no consensus at all, of course. So that's just an example of a thesis. So in the 9 theses, what I did was I posted them as a little appendix of my user space. And then there's a talk page, which is like a discussion forum which is attached to that. I also put them on my blog. Sorry, larrysanger.org. You can find it right at the top. 9 theses on Wikipedia. That's the easiest way to find them. larrysanger.org. And there's a summary there of the 9 theses. It looks just like a table of contents, which is what it is. And then there's paragraph long versions. And then each of the headlines is linked to a longer essay. And you put all the essays together and it prints out at something like maybe 120, 130 pages. I'm not really sure. Um, so that's what we're talking about. And basically the day after the 9 theses were posted, it just so happens, and maybe this isn't a total coincidence, Elon Musk announced Grokopedia, and Grokopedia was launched in its very first version, like version 0.1. So very, very basic and not at all complete. Just a month later.
Just to
Uh,
clarify, Grokopedia is an encyclopedia written by Grok? Or how does
yes,
that work? Okay. Grok is the AI of X.
exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, has actually gotten considerably better than it was when it was launched. It's Grok, I would say now is um, it's very competitive at this point with Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, um, and I regularly use Grok and ChatGPT. But now we're getting off topic. So um, yeah, and there's been a lot of conversations in a few different places on Wikipedia itself, also a little bit on my blog and a lot of other places. I've done the speaking circuit, and actually, this is actually part of that. That I would say toward the end of that, we're kind of winding that down at this point. Um, and yeah, we've had a lot of publicity about the nine theses, which I'm happy to say. Um, and I should also say that I got some help from some smart people in drafting the nine theses, and so it wasn't just me. I wrote the whole thing, of course, and they're my ideas, but there are a lot of people who want to reform Wikipedia, a lot of people who have been left out in the cold, essentially. And the general idea is we can change Wikipedia. And I think it's actually true. Wikipedia, from especially anything like a conservative point of view, perhaps from in India, from a Hindu point of view, it looks entirely captured, like there's nothing that you can do about it. But I really don't think that's entirely true. I think that we can make some progress, at least on the margins, and that can do some good, which is the reason why I have spent basically the last year um, as part of my duties on the Knowledge Standards Foundation, actually trying to improve Wikipedia.
Yeah, you are right about that being difficult, although not impossible. I have at one point tried to edit Wikipedia, wherein I would go to my high school and then I would try to add some information that only I would know. For example, the principal or whatever. And that is a it's a page that is not super famous, very niche popularity. And that in and of itself, an edit like that would get reverted. In addition to that, I've also seen vandalism done on the page. Like somebody could go to Wikipedia and then type in poo poo and just leave. I wonder how long things like that stay. I mean, pretty early on, like 30 seconds and then they're gone, I guess, if
Sure.
I'm not wrong.
Yeah, that tends to be reverted very quickly. Yes.
Yes. All right, so back to the nine TCs. Your thesis one is your exposing of the so-called consensus that they have. And
Mhm.
is there an alternative to consensus that you propose? What can be done about that?
I don't actually. That's my proposal is simply. I mean, I make a few very rough suggestions, but they're not the point. The point is to simply um, pressure Wikipedians to be honest about the labeling of their process. That's the most important thing here. Now, yes, I do think that the process that they have now, which essentially involves the most influential people on the working on the page, imposing their will on anyone who happens to show up. That's essentially what's going on. Um, and that's wrong. Um exactly how to change that is it's a very deep question. It's actually very hard. It's not unique to Wikipedia, but on Wikipedia it's especially um, difficult to deal with because of the constraints. It has to be anonymous. It has to, which means you can't really use a vote-based system, right? It's so anyway, I really don't want to go into the details. It's something I've given a lot of thought, and I've proposed a few different systems. People often talk about the X system of community notes. If you're familiar with that, if you've spent very much time on X, um, then you'll be familiar with how community notes works. Essentially, if accounts that have tended to vote on one side of an issue, usually like a culture war issue, um, agree with accounts on that historically vote on the other side, then that community note will be promoted, right? So if there's sort of um, inter partisan agreement on facts, then those are treated as facts. I guess that's the idea. Maybe something like that could be approximated. It wouldn't have to be exactly the same as on X. Um, there's a lot of possible systems. I actually think they need to do a lot of experimentation, but that sort of thing is not looked kindly on, actually, by Wikipedians. Wikipedians are very much set in their ways. It's institutionally conservative, not politically, though.
Oh, I get it. Just to briefly pivot from 90s for a bit, I do want to ask you about AI and Wikipedia. Uh, with the advent of AI, I believe I personally have stopped using search engines, not stopped, at least severely reduced. So if I want to know the distance between India and Singapore, usually the idea is to go to Google, but I do that on any LLM at the moment. So Wikipedia probably has sort of a monopoly on a credible source of information. With the growth of AI, do you think that status like that would change? What would the future of Wikipedia look like?
Um, I think that people will go immediately to Wikipedia less often, and there's already been a very slight downtick in the amount of traffic. I can't quote numbers to you, I'm afraid, but you can look it up. And there was the first yearly decline in traffic. I understand um, in 2025, or maybe it was 2024. At any rate. Uh, but whether it's ever going to entirely collapse, I don't know about that, actually. I think that if you use LLMs the way that I use them, and I think a lot of people use them this way, you'll look up some question, and then you'll actually think about whether you buy this answer because you know that LLMs can be wrong. Um, and you actually do have to think critically about the information regardless of the source, whether it's Wikipedia or LLMs. Um, and so you'll look for some proof, right? Unless it like doesn't matter at all, then maybe and you're busy, you won't look for a second source. And people have used search engines in that same way too, right? But yes, I tend to use LLMs now in place of search engines, but I will end up on some other more objective human written source to check up on an LLM answer quite often, right? Like one thing that I'll just give you a little fun example.
Mhm.
Um, I have a so-called project set up in I think it's ChatGPT, and when you set up a project, it allows you to give instructions, and so this is a movie rating um, project, and what I do is I give it like 10 paragraphs of descriptions of what I like about movies. You know,
Okay.
what's a good movie to me? What are the and I go through things like, you know, categories, noir, old movies, has to be, you know, moralistic in a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. And then it fairly reliably predicts for me what movies are good. But a lot of times you know, it will not have some piece of information that I want, you know, so it'll recommend a certain movie, and I'll then go to IMDb and look at what their average rating there is, or look at some of the human written reviews and things like that. So the idea is we are going forward going to need objective sources of information as checks upon these LLMs. As far as we can tell right now, LLMs are not really creative in any meaningful way at all. They're simply averaging the information that is contained in sources like Wikipedia, right? And that then gives us a reason to check the sources themselves. So that's the um, I suppose that's my answer to that. So.
Would you consider that with the inception of AI, mean, we have come a little far from just the inception, but do you think that Wikipedia is going to be around, but it's just the usage of it is going to be different? For example, when you go to LLMs, at least ChatGPT still takes a large chunk of its information from Wikipedia if you see the links right next to it.
Mhm.
So, like you said, I agree that it's not going away anytime soon, at least. But is that the case for all AIs? Every one of them just depend on Wikipedia for, is that what they're trained on? All of them?
Um, well, let's put it this way. Uh, it's possible to write an original article from other sources than Wikipedia, doing in effect what Wikipedia does using an LLM. I know this because I've actually done it before. I've actually gone through the process of iterating an article using ChatGPT. I've even written some code that interacts with APIs that does the same thing. So the idea behind Grokopedia, for example, is quite natural, and there's nothing obviously wrong about it, um, which is fascinating, right? The whole idea of a machine written encyclopedia. Um, it's like Wikipedia. Um, it's possible to read the sources, extract the information, summarize it, organize it in various ways. So I mean, so the brief answer is, of course, yes, of course, it's possible to write, or rather to have an LLM and to have an LLM written encyclopedia that makes no use of Wikipedia at all. Wikipedia to not entirely, right? Because there's a lot of information in Wikipedia that is has no source. I actually like that information, by the way. I mean, I think people complain the principal of the of your high school that should have been in the Wikipedia article about it. It's ridiculous that they removed that, as far as I'm concerned. And they could put you down as a source in the footnotes that this is a student who went there, whatever. Um, uh, Nevertheless, uh, what's great about Wikipedia is that Wikipedia has that um, all of that other kinds of more difficult to document information from human sources that might not show up in a traditional book or news article or whatever. Anyway, that being said, um, if you go through the entire library, all the information in, well, I live close to Ohio State University. We have an enormous library at Ohio State University, and especially if you include the network that we're part of, you can find practically any book you want. Um, and if you were to train an LLM on all of that information, if it had all of the facts contained in all of those books and journal articles, um, you know, properly ingested, um, then the result would be uh, an order of magnitude larger than Wikipedia. People talk about Wikipedia being like this enormous thing, and it is, of course, it is. Um, but if you want to find um, specialized information that is relevant to writing an essay for an upper division or graduate level course, you actually will find relatively little in many cases. It really depends on the field. There tends to be more perhaps technical information, but even there, a lot of times, if you're writing a paper in science, you have to dig out some obscure papers, right? And the obscure stuff isn't in Wikipedia. There's like a couple of orders of magnitude more information contained in libraries than are in Wikipedia. It's just a fact, right? Wikipedia,
Mhm.
it's big. It's big. I know, but it isn't as big as people think.
Oh, got it. I mean, the English Wikipedia has about or over 7 million articles, if I'm not wrong.
Could be 70 million, could be 500 million. If you actually talked about all of the topics that are mentioned in graduate level courses around the world on every subject.
Wow, interesting. Oh, th that reminds me of the Indian languages Wikipedia that we might have. I think I didn't actually count, but all the major languages in India of India have a uh, that particular language Wikipedia and online. I mean, I am a speaker of Tamil and Telugu, and both of them have separate Wikipedias. And incidentally, Tamil Wikipedia, Hindi, and Urdu are the three Wikipedias with the highest number of our articles. And
Urdu, wow,
Urdu, yes.
cool.
And sorry, you were saying?
Cool. I did
Oh,
not know that.
yeah, we have a sizable Urdu speaking population. Um, I am wondering if there are any if there's any advice that you could give the people present here and to Indians in general, how will we make these different language Indian non-European language Wikipedias, especially in Indian Wikipedias, to at least be comparable to EN Wiki? What could we do on that front?
Um, that's a good question. Um, something that I've always regretted is not learning one language well enough to read a lot in it. I'm almost there in French. and reasonably in German. I've studied like three or four other languages as well to some extent, but I couldn't like read or write in the Wikipedias on those. So I've regretted not having the language skills that would enable me to form an informed opinion on the other languages. Um, what I am told is that in other languages, the content is similar in sort of outlook, approach, bias, policies as Wikipedia, except when it isn't, right? Like, so you go to the Arabic Wikipedia, and it is basically very, very, very pro-Muslim. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I understand that. Um, uh, let's see. So, first of all,
That's good information. So they're not just translated from English to regional language. People are
yes.
autonomous when it comes to
Well,
interesting.
one one thing that AI would be particularly good at, and some entrepreneur, and this is pretty much just a technical project. Um, so I bet any number of people in the audience here might be able to do this, is to go through all of the different articles on the top 100,000 topics or something like that in the English language Wikipedia or in other Wikipedias and collect the information, translate it all into English, and then programmatically collate it, as it were, and actually show when information that is not in the English language Wikipedia in like another color, so that we could actually see just how much more information there is in other um, Wikipedia.
Languages, right?
Yes, yes. So now this isn't answering your question. Um, So first of all, yes, it's just objectively true that there's a lot of high quality research done in English. It is sort of the language of research, and the modern day lingua franca, of course. Um, that being said, for local information, there is. This is my impression based on a few different things over the years that I've seen. Um, that there is this tendency, a bias toward the information that appears in English, even when there's a lot more detailed information in the other languages. So I would think, just for example, that you've got if you're writing an article about some tourist destination in
Mhm,
language of, Telugu, whatever,
mhm,
all right, you would, there are doubtless um, guidebooks, other kinds of books, magazines, etc., written in Telugu websites
mhm,
um, that have um, legitimate information, all right? So these people are not stupid, right? And they're not just babbling. They're actually sharing information as local lore that matters. And that is information that wouldn't appear in English sources, let's stipulate. I actually think that it would be uh, particularly important to have that information documented if for no other reason than having it documented will materially increase the amount of information. Um, it's a huge mistake, it seems to me, if the only window on the world as far as encyclopedias go um, is in the English language. Because, people writing in English are often simply ignorant of things who are writing in other languages. That's, I mean, obvious. So, yes, especially when it comes to like local geography and culture and other things that is situated. Religion, of course, a lot of important topics. So,
So that is done to the extent that well, you're right in pointing out that a Telugu source or a Hindi source about, say, for example, Mumbai would be discounted on English Wikipedia, even though even though the academic rigor that went into that particular source could be superior to the sources that are simply in English. That is
mhm,
interesting. I
right?
I am. Mhm. Go on.
It's not just the comparative academic rigor. Even if it weren't as academically rigorous, the fact that it is from a local source gives it a kind of credibility that a source in Oxford would not have.
Absolutely. And that makes me wonder if Wikipedia Hindi or Wikipedia Tamil, if they are considered by Indians ourselves. I don't know how many of my friends and peers would trust Wikipedia Hindi or Wikipedia English. I have to ask them. But yeah, that is an interesting point to consider.
Hmm,
Hmm.
interesting.
So
Somebody do a poll
yeah.
here if that's possible.
Oh yeah, I would have to conduct that.
Right.
Um, and I do have one last question for you. Do you think that you've expressed some hope and optimism for Grokopedia? Do you think that Grokopedia or potentially other PD and online encyclopedias could rise in comparable competition to Wikipedia or in someday, sometime in the future, surpass Wikipedia? And it would be nice to include the multi-language feature on that. That would be something that Elon Musk can take into consideration. But do you think that that is a possibility?
Um, so the question is, do I think that Grokopedia can eventually be competitive with Wikipedia? Is that the question?
Wikipedia, other PDFs, sure, yeah.
Yep. Well, so in short, yes, I think it's very possible. I wouldn't rule it out. I think that uh, the thing that we will learn shortly, like within the next couple of years, is the extent to which Grokopedia can avoid a certain kind of diagnostic error that it makes. Diagnostic meaning which is characteristic of LLMs. So there's a certain kind of error that LLMs make, and which is reflected in the output of Grokopedia, um, which is well, I find very annoying. I read word for word the entire article titled Larry Sanger, and I am the world's greatest authority on that topic. So
Right.
I I know what is correct and what is not, and I found it interesting. So Wikipedia itself does this, by the way. People will see certain things reported, and they'll draw reasonable inferences, which are in fact not correct. So the Grokopedia article said, just for example, that I became an agnostic, being influenced by the fact that my father was a scientist. Now, it's true that I became an agnostic, and it's also true that my father was a marine biologist, a seabird biologist. But those two things had nothing to do with each other. In fact, that was just an inference that was made, a connection that was made by the LLM. I don't think that was reflected in Wikipedia. Um, and one thing that I would tell the Grokopedia people is that if they want to avoid that, they're going to have to engage human beings at some point in the mix. I have a feeling. I don't know if that's really in any time soon going to be um, avoidable. And one way to do that, like the thing that immediately comes to mind is LLMs are reasonably good at describing themselves, at their own output, right? Um, so you could ask it to look at a paragraph and say, have you made any inferences here, as opposed that go beyond what are contained in your sources? And it would be able to look up the source and quickly and so forth, and it would say, okay, yes, there's this and this and this, and then you just make a list of questions, right? And then you could invite human beings. I actually think that if there is something that ends up superior to Wikipedia, it will
Mhm.
be an iteration of what Grokopedia is already doing, namely engaging human beings. So it's possible for people to submit edits to Grokopedia, and Grok, the LLM, will actually make the edits itself, which is fascinating to me, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. No one has ever done that before, by the way. This is the first time when a public encyclopedia has ever been edited by um, an LLM in real time um, for public consumption. That's really something. And where in order to make the edits, or to suggest the edits, um, you simply interact with Grok. I mean, that's
Mhm.
just it's really amazing that they've made a front end that way. And
That
that,
seems
by
to
the way,
be. Mhm.
go on Grok and just have a chat. And if you come across a Grokopedia article and you think something is incorrect, you can say, "Did you know that such and such a fact in such and such an article is incorrect? Here's the real fact, and here's the source." It will go and make the change, even though you weren't even on the Grokopedia site.
Oh, oh wow. I wonder what goes on at the back end, how Grokopedia decide whether or not to. Yeah, I've never interacted with that whole ecosystem. That is completely foreign to me. Sounds totally interesting. However,
It is.
and
Yeah, yeah.
it's
So the bottom line is, I actually do think that in time, especially as LLMs get better in general, we really don't know what the upper bounds, if there is one, on the capabilities of LLMs are. I tend to think as a sort of um, basic hypothesis. You should you should predict the future with some modesty, right?
Mhm,
And so the idea is, um, my view is that LLMs will approximate, but never reach as a sort of asymptotic limit the level of quality found in the training data, right?
mhm.
And you'll be able to sometimes go beyond in terms of valid inferences, right? But that actually is again the thing that LLMs are bad at. They're good at assembling information that's already there, but when it comes to making any sort of creative or even mechanical inferences from the information in the sources, it's not that great. So we'll see.
All right, all right. Um,
You're breaking up. Your picture has frozen, I'm afraid.
and
Okay, no,
yeah, hi. Do you still see me, Larry? Am I still audible?
yes, now you are.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we will have to conclude our conversation between the two of us for now. I would have loved to pick your brain more, but I would have loved to discuss the nine theses more in detail, but for everybody who is interested, you can find it both in Wikipedia at Larry's user page, or more easily at larrysanger.org, his blog, if I'm getting that correctly, Larry, that is it, right? Right.
Um,
And
yep,
okay,
Larry,
so
SANGER.org.
yes, correct. That is the blog. It's a very interesting one. You would it's fascinating to read to what Larry's mind, the co-founder, who has been looking at it from a perspective that is not polluted by what's happening in Wikipedia. It's a fresh one to know what the future of Wikipedia and information consumed on the internet can look like. And Larry, would you be we're now going to open the floor for questions from the audience, but however, they will be communicating via their chat box. Can we take those questions if you're okay with that?
Of course.
All right. I will read it out. Um, Vishal asks us you a question about LLM. Why does AI, why do AI models work better when you, that is, I'm not sure if that was meant to be a joke, but then, yeah, the question is, why do they work better when you are more aggressive towards them?
Uh, um, Interesting. Right. And I've noticed this myself. Like I think simply asking it to spend more tokens on a problem that will tend to result in a better output. It isn't necessarily, you're being aggressive so much as simply pushing back and asking for another pass through the information. And sometimes all you need to do is ask, "Are you sure?" And it will find more information. Or generally speaking, like ChatGPT doesn't do this automatically, but I will have it, look up sources online, and that often helps. Um, but yeah, it'll like check its work. Uh,
Oh. Right. We've got Sonia asking us, is there a uh, I think the words are left-leaning bias on Wikipedia. Do we
Um,
have a left-leaning bias on Wikipedia?
I think on topics where there is a dispute between left and right, generally speaking, yes, there is a left-leaning bias. Um, just think of American presidents, for example. So the articles about um, Republicans, uh, they pull no punches, and can be quite hostile. In the case of Trump, of course, it's extremely hostile. The number of times in which something things that Trump has said are characterized as lies is it's dozens. He's called a liar dozens of times in the articles. It's not really unbiased, is it? His defenders will rarely say such things, and the article about, say, Barack Obama or um, um, Hillary Clinton, they tend to be or Biden tend to be puff pieces. But that's just examples. There's a lot of other kinds of articles in um, these science wars and on religious topics, where the more conservative views or the are misrepresented, not represented, Um, yeah.
I say we've got another question from Amit Chandra. It is it possible to achieve neutrality in the world of large-scale public knowledge, or this not a feasible goal?
Um, it's a valid question, of course. I think it's entirely possible to have, uh, because we've seen many examples of it, of neutral reporting, neutral textbooks, um, and neutral encyclopedia articles. There's over the years we have seen many of these things, so it's possible. But the question um, is it possible to for a large open collaboration like Wikipedia to be neutral? I, I think maybe at this point it is still possible. We certainly had a lot more in the way of uh, neutrality in the first 5 years of Wikipedia, I would say. Um, and well, then the question is, why is that? I think the contributors to Wikipedia in those first years still read and respected the original neutrality policy. And then it was over the years, it was changed subtly. There were a lot of new policies that were added that changed the color of certain aspects. Um, so the fact that Wikipedia is as biased as it is, should not be taken as an indicator of what's possible. I don't know why it would be. It's just changing Wikipedia itself. That's another question, isn't it? That might be very difficult or even impossible. So we haven't really tried though, have we? Not
Yeah,
in
that
any,
is true.
yeah.
Not in any tangible, real capacity. All
Yep.
right, we have got another question from Christy Abraham. Uh, they need your opinion on this. Will Wiki have different takes on Venezuela crisis according to the region? Following this, can we have definite truths in the present world?
I didn't quite get the last question. Are there definite truths in the present world? Or
I think what the question is it possible for Wikipedia to be objective at all?
ah, um, so uh, I don't know. First of all, it seems to me that any hot war, especially one involving the United States and especially involving Trump, um, is going to be very highly contested on all the relevant languages. So definitely in English and Spanish and probably some other languages as well. Russian, who
Mhm,
knows? Because there are people who are trying to um, influence world opinion, and they will spend money, perhaps a significant amount of money, um, influencing Wikipedia in order to do that. Um,
mhm,
well, so then the question here is it? I so I don't like the question. I understand why you ask it, but it's a philosophical question, isn't it? I mean,
mhm.
is it possible for there to be objective facts
Truth at
reported?
all? Yeah.
If there are any objective facts at all, and they are stated in Wikipedia, then the answer is yes. I happen to believe in objective facts. I am a philosophical objectivist in that sense. I believe, or what's called a realist about um, about the truth. Um, so I believe that there are actual um, uh, verifiable is not really. Let's just say that some statements stand in a correspondence relationship to reality. That's the jargon in philosophy. It's absolutely correct. Um, but the question is not so much whether Wikipedia can or ever will reliably reflect such things. I don't even think that Wikipedia should be aiming at doing that exclusively, because that's actually incompatible. The aim of articulating only fact, only objective truth on Wikipedia is actually incompatible with neutrality. It's, also incompatible with people making up their own damn minds about things, right?
Hmm.
So if you want to leave people free to make up their own minds about things, then you can't take a stand on certain issues. You actually have to represent the full panoply of views. And think about it, right? If the truth about some topic is P, a proposition,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, there are lots of different ways of getting P wrong, but if you're actually cataloging them all in an encyclopedia article, there's necessarily going to be more false statements than true ones.
Correct.
You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yeah.
Or at least, um, uh, so. Um, what that means is that the purpose of an encyclopedia, of a reference, generally speaking, is not just to state propositions in a way that they can just be ingested and accepted. That's not how the human mind works or should work. We need to uh, use our God-given ability um, to think things through for ourselves. Um, and if we're not doing that, then we're actually um, uh, contracting out that labor to others, right? We're giving that decision-making ability to others. If they actually are a reliable source and so forth, great. But how many of those are there out there? And historically, not very many. A lot of people in the media and even like traditional encyclopedias like
Mhm.
Britannica, they've got a, a, a biases of their own. So yes, you just need to continue. Don't expect objective truth. You need to bring rather expect
Right.
neutrality and bring your critical abilities to bear and just learn as much as you can.
Sure, sure. It's an instrument that provides accessories with which you can determine truth, not something masquerading as truth, is what you're saying.
Mhm.
Okay. We've got another question from Tejas Singh Charan. Wikipedia is seen as a source of knowledge, but as we all know, it is openly editable by anyone with internet access. How does Wikipedia try to maintain credibility in this era of misinformation?
Um, right. An era of misinformation. There's always been misinformation. People have always been wrong about things. Um, I suppose we live in an era of misinformation in two different ways. Um, in one way, there are, you know, international organizations, beginning with the UN, began talking about misinformation as a serious problem about 2014, 2015, something like that. And they actually started doing things about it. Government policies began to be changed. Um, and to my mind, that's actually not a good thing. Um, on the other hand, it is true that on the internet, um, nobody knows you're a dog. Nobody knows if you're
Right.
lying, and unless you do a lot of research and that sort of epistemic situation um, is what made the UN push for, solving the problem of misinformation um, credible in the first place, right? So
Mhm.
there is a kind of problem. I have to agree with that. It's just that I mean, it's just reflecting the fact that people have a lot of different opinions, and the internet is an open place, right? So, like
Mhm.
anybody can make an account and go on social media or online forums of various kinds and just share uh, their point of view. It just that what their point of view is um, it just happens to be labeled as misinformation, right?
Mhm.
Um, so what this is a reaction to is the fact that there is uh, an enormous amount of very diverse humanity online interacting with each other, rubbing shoulders. I think it's great, that I am able to talk to Indian people on X, which I have done a lot. Um, um, and I would never have the opportunity to do that when I was a kid, of course. Um, I mean, why would I have? There weren't even that many immigrants, so I had never even met an Indian person until I got to high school, I remember. So anyway. Yeah, I actually think there's something antisocial about the push against um, misinformation as such. In other words, labeling it as such. I mean, of course, I'm a philosopher. I love the truth, um, and my whole career has been an attempt to organize people to share the truth as efficiently and as well as possible. Um, to create learning resources of various kinds. So yeah, that's really important to me. But it bothers me and is actually contrary to the interests of our, learning the truth for ourselves to um, uh, to just sort of blithely uh, assert that whole categories of people and of opinion are simply false, right? A good example on Wikipedia is the articles on religion in Wikipedia, especially about Christianity, um, may not use the Bible as a source in itself. It's only the Bible as interpreted by someone. And generally speaking, um, what's called confessional, or in other words, the more devoutly believing Christian scholarship is regarded as substandard and not really usable on Wikipedia. There are exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, if there is a view that is taken by people who arrogate to themselves the credibility of fighters of misinformation, right?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Then um, they will use that to basically silence people that they disagree with, and that's wrong.
These people who they silence could be genuine, knowledgeable purveyors of information, and it is they just unilaterally just block them out of sharing their piece. It's very fascinating to me, for lack of a better term. I'm not actually fascinated by the Bible not being able to use as a citing material for Christianity, but interpretations of the Bible, yeah,
Right.
well, it is.
So if you look at the article, the Wikipedia article titled Yahweh,
Mhm,
Yahweh, also Jehovah, right? That's the name of the
mhm,
Christian and Jewish God.
right.
Um, and uh, you would think that one of the first things that would be said about it is this is the God of the Jews and the Christians, and what we know about Yahweh
Mhm,
is to a very great extent
mhm,
found in the Bible,
mhm,
right? And that what the Bible says about Yahweh would be fully canvassed, in other words, fully represented in Wikipedia, but it's not. It's only it's in other words, the sort of attitude that the Bible itself takes toward the God of Christianity and Judaism um, is replaced with a historical reconstruction of the origin
mhm,
of the Yahweh cult out of pagan roots.
mhm.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That there is this sort of cultural imperialism that is going on there, which is something that I would think the Hindus would actually appreciate.
When it comes from them, they would.
Right, I suppose.
Well, we've got the final question for today from Sudhanshu Nima, and it goes, do you think it's possible to assess neutrality for pages and make explicit mention of it? Would that help?
Yes. So one thing that I've thought of doing and may still yet do is to make a wrapper website for Wikipedia in which
Mhm,
we come together to comment on Wikipedia articles. And that would include, of course, comments about the neutrality of articles. I can tell you, I worked for Ballotpedia, which is an encyclopedia of American politics. It's really good.
oh,
Um, and I wrote a long essay called Why Neutrality for Ballotpedia. And
why neutrality in general? Just why
it,
neutrality?
the title of the article is Why Neutrality. In other words, it's explaining why neutrality as a policy should be embraced for encyclopedias like Ballotpedia.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I was asked to do was to help evaluate candidates for a position that they hired for. I don't know if they still have such people, but um, they were called neutrality editors. All right,
Oh,
so
wow.
these, yeah, they were
Mhm.
journalists who were specifically tasked to look over the neutrality and to act as consultants, internal consultants. Um, on Ballotpedia. And the interesting thing about it is something that I had not known before that not so well is that even people who are very clearly, one side of the political spectrum,
Mhm.
if you have a certain amount of training in um, um, journalism, right,
Mhm. Mhm.
that gives you the ability, if you're a serious journalist, right, that actually gives you the ability to deal with neutrality issues that's unusually good. So, like these people were remarkably good at identifying what was wrong in terms of neutrality with a lot of articles. So, like the task that we had them do is to actually look at some sample articles um, and to identify sort of systematically problems with those articles. And I looked at their work and I was just like I was amazed that they caught all of these problems that I myself um, had not caught. Um, and I could tell based on the sorts of things that they said that they were drawing on their experience as journalists. So this is all me explaining basically people who are properly trained as journalists. Journalism is a it's a respectable profession if it's done well, right?
Mhm.
And it's really hard. Like if you want to be a really good journalist, it's extremely hard. And people who are uh, trained and practiced journalists are just the sort of people that you would want in a project to review the neutrality of articles. That being said, the article, the topics were all politics, and these were all political reporters, and so they had specialized knowledge, and that's actually a lot of people don't realize that if you want to have a fully worked out, refined notion of just how biased or unbiased an article is, you really have to have expertise on the topic. If you don't, then you will just assume that some things are
Neutral when they're not.
neutral, and they're not. It's exactly, yes. Mhm.
Okay, Lara, if you've got the time, there is one last question. We could take
Okay.
that. All right, thank you very much. This is from Tushti Sharma. There's a message. Let me just read it out for you. Hi, first of all, I'm a student who's personally inspired by your work to the core. I am here to learn and thus presenting a question to you. Um, what is that one thing that has inspired you the most to step out of your comfort zone in the early days and do something great in life? There are actually it's a two-part question. Second, if you could give one advice for a 19-year-old who wants to become an author slash writer.
Mhm. Um, well, to take the second one first, I think
Mhm.
to be a really good author, writer, you have to actually have something to write about, and you need to do a lot of reading. That's the most important thing. Like if there's one general piece of advice that I would give to young people generally is read a lot. That is life changing. Um, not just because you will read life-changing books, but because having a massive amount of information at your fingertips changes your perspective on many things. And the best writers are simply well informed. So, and also, of course, the experience of reading that many uh, um, examples will improve your style. Okay, so let's see. Uh, so the question had to do with
Comfort zone.
I didn't know that I was starting something great. Okay, when I was starting Wikipedia, um, I didn't think that it was going to succeed. I don't think that most things that I do are going to succeed because that's just being modest.
Same. Hmm.
Yes. Uh,
But history and the present prove otherwise. We have great projects that have changed the course of history that you've
right.
been a part of. Yeah, yeah.
Well, right. Um, so I guess what exactly is the question again?
Sorry, the question is, let me go back to what inspired you the most to step out of your comfort zone in the early
Right.
days? In the early
Yeah.
days that led
Uh,
you to do something great.
um, like I don't have a comfort zone. I'm always out of my comfort zone, essentially, mostly because uh, I when I grew up, when I was a teenager, I came to realize that a lot of maybe all of the problems that beset the people around me were due to their believing false things. And fairly quickly, I learned that learning the truth in all its detail with any amount of certainty is extremely difficult. And I ended up becoming a methodological skeptic, right? Which actually got in the way of my religious faith. I didn't become a Christian until 5 years ago. Um, but this isn't about that. Um, the point is that um, I'm constantly thinking about half-baked ideas because I allow myself to, right? I don't have a filter on a lot of my ideas. Um, and if you really want to do something great in the sense of being innovative, but and by the way, a lot of the greatest things are not innovative at all. They involve like caring for people, and or just shoring up an existing institution that needs to be preserved or whatever, right? It doesn't. Not all greatness takes the form of innovation. Um, and there is moral greatness, that is more easily found in a baby than
Right.
in fully
Anyone
qualified.
older than that. Yeah.
Yes. Um, so yeah, I mean the bottom line is you obviously need to if you're going to innovate, if that's what you're talking about, then you need to think outside the box, as they say. Um, it's like it's obvious, I suppose, but it's true. What that means, as far as I'm concerned, is that you you don't make assumptions. You're constantly asking questions about your assumptions. Like I always come back because again I spend half my time now on one aspect or another of theology and Bible study at this point.
Mhm.
I'm constantly asking questions about the text, right? And it's the same way with anything. If I'm working on, and I am also working on this too, um, on ways to improve on Wikipedia, um, advice that I would give to Grokopedia, etc. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm I'm going to do my best to just set aside all of my presuppositions, which is really hard, actually. And it's not a thing that people naturally do. So, anyway, I hope that helps. Kind
Yeah,
of obvious.
yes. Well, thank you so very much, Larry, for joining us and talking to us and telling us about your experiences and what you've learned in your life so far. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining in and for learning. And I hope that you take home what we've discussed. And Larry, do you recommend that we ask people to contribute more freely and courageously to Wikipedia? Is that something that you advise people
Absolutely.
to do? Well,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yes, and I will probably be putting my money where my mouth is there and contributing more to Wikipedia in the coming months myself. So
Well, there you have it, folks. You can start if you have accounts, start contributing. If you don't have, create one and let's contribute to Wikipedia along with Larry over here. And Yeah, thank you very much for all of your time. Thanks especially to you, Larry, for joining us for this long conversation.